ask you a question.
Go ahead. That's a question. No? All righty, we will be in order, and we'll begin our deliberations. Couple of points to note. Before I do that, Ms. Creasy, do you have anything you want to give us a heads up on?
Just our regular logistics that we will not be taking verbal comment this evening, but if anyone sends an email to my address during the meeting, then that will be attached to the minutes, or if our in-person audience would like to use paper and pen, then we have that option as well, and those will be attached to the minutes. And that's pretty much it for tonight.
Hey, a couple points to note. We will not be in the position to make a recommendation today. We are waiting for more feedback from all the legal entities regarding the anti-displacement language. Hopefully we'll get that language at the, and be able to review it in the second part of our meeting on Tuesday of next week. And with that, and with you guys having reviewed the revisions that James is going to circulate before that meeting, hopefully by the end of that meeting, Tuesday's meeting, we'll be able to make a recommendation.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you're saying that after the 3 public hearings on Tuesday, we're going to take the business matter?
I only remember there being 2.
There's just 2.
Now, one is incredibly complicated.
2 with many actions.
Okay.
And
I'm
don't-
not yet through to page 477 of that.
And there are only, just note, there are only 3 actions that we're required next Tuesday. One is the zoning piece, one is the consistency with comprehensive plan on the road, and the other is the steep critical slope. Those other things are things council will need to take action on. Thank you for the coaching, Ms. Creasy. Right, so you guys hopefully have looked at this. What this is we start out with the things our input, and then the red lines are James's attempt to embrace the input that we've got. So, James, I think it probably would be better if I just let you kind of moderate through the document and what you've done. Mr. Please.
All right, so this evening, there's actually two documents that we sent forward. One is the proposed text changes based on y'all's comments going from Article 4 through to Article 7. That document stands at just over 9 pages. And then the second document we have was potential edits for the historic districts. This is based on comments we received from Preservation Piedmont. These are mostly technical edits. There's one substantive, really one policy discussion really in here, though, that is worth discussing. I think what I'd like to start with is the Article 4 through 7. And this time they're numbered, so this should be a little bit easier. The first, number 1, is the provisions related to affordable dwelling units. Last time we had people speak, I mean, I can just kind of introduce each of these items, and then we could discuss from there. Is that how you want to do it?
That's good for me.
All right.
You think that'll be more efficient?
All right. So there were 4 components to this, and I believe, so the first one was a proposal from Commissioner Stolzenberg to increase the affordable housing bonus to 3 floors in the 8 and 10-story districts. The notion there, well, I'll let you explain what the notion was. I looked into this a little bit, but so it does as, well, let me go ahead and let you explain what you're proposing in that. Go ahead.
Sure. So the basic idea is, previously we had a blanket 2-floor bonus based on, no matter what the height was, right? So a 2-floor bonus in a CX3 district is like a very large bonus, 66%. Whereas in an NX10 bonus, it's down to 20%. And so the goal, we would love to have people offer these deeply affordable units, and especially in these tall buildings where you would then get a whole lot of units. They're also in the places in the city where we most want people to live, like near downtown, and in great places to redevelop. Also, to be honest, once you're at 12 stories, a 13th probably doesn't make a huge difference visually. Plus, everyone skips 13 on the elevator, so they can bill it as 14. But the goal here is just to make that bonus a little bit more proportional based on the height you're already getting. That, and because at 8 stories you are you're jumping into a much more expensive class of building that's all steel and concrete. We're rarely, I think, going to see an 8-story building pencil. And so once you can get a little bit taller and start dividing those fixed costs among more units and more floor area, it becomes a little bit more viable. And that's all.
I just wanted to note, in looking into this, one of the things I wanted to check is, does this help address the issue we're facing where the taller projects, the projects that are that are using concrete and steel, right now aren't financially feasible by the model, by the analysis that our consultant has provided. This doesn't change that calculation in any way. It does exactly what you're describing in that it equalizes the incentive. But in terms of making the numbers work for those taller buildings, it still doesn't. You're basically still, from a construction perspective, in the hole with each floor that you build.
No, so maybe no one will use it, but
Right.
if they do, we get a lot of deeply affordable units. I will say, I think a deficiency of that model is that it doesn't assume that your marginal cost decreases as you add a floor, for example, within the same type of construction, where typically your foundation and engineering and whatever costs probably won't change proportionally based on that extra floor area. But it would start to be a very complicated model if you started to account for that. But I don't know.
Feedback. Mr. Schwartz?
My only question, I'm not sure if you got to this, is whether if someone, to take advantage of the bonus units, or the bonus provisions, how much residential do you actually have to put with it? I'm not sure you're aggressive with that yet.
I discussed that with our consultant team, and they're basically suggesting that, one could take advantage of the bonus with just putting in some nominal amount of residential. They don't anticipate that being a likely scenario. That's just not an approach they would anticipate, from their perspective, a developer taking. So
I'm skeptical of that, given
Sure.
what we saw in our downtown extended zone, where we saw
what
exactly that happen.
what we've seen, as I understand it,
Single
what we-
units,
single
yeah.
units,
Mhm.
as opposed, but someone would need to put in a whole floor, presumably, of residential in order to, they'd have to put
Why?
in multiple units.
Is that explicit in the code?
Because in order to get to the bonus, you would need to, well, what are you suggesting? Someone would put in one,
At 50%?
One unit,
One-
100% of their units are at 50% AMI by putting in one unit at 50%
Sure.
AMI.
Sure.
I think one easy way to fix that might be to say that all of the bonus floors have to be residential as a reasonable standard there.
mhm.
But that may not be so that you're essentially going to be putting people on the 11th, 12th, and 14th floor.
Well, no, you
on
don't
the
have to,
bottom.
you don't have to suggest,
Not literally the floors, but
Right, right.
that amount of.
Yeah, that all of the bonus height goes to, all of the difference goes to affordable housing, or goes to residential affordable. Huh. I'm sure they'd all prefer to be on the second floor. Nobody wants to,
There's great views from up there.
yeah.
Well, it won't all be going to affordable, right?
Be all residential
It'll
and
be the
10%
10%
affordable.
of those.
All residential, 10%.
I'm okay with this if we have some sort of, if staff can come up with some sort of provision that prevents a single unit.
sure.
I would say I think we need that regardless of this
Mm-hmm.
this particular thing.
Either that way or a percentage of the building square footage is
Yeah,
dedicated to
that's the other way we
residential.
did it, which got a little messy. The other thing I would add to this, we, I believe, last time agreed to put it back into DX, and I would want to include that in here, so that parking lot behind my apartment can be lots of apartments.
I see,
The
because because you hadn't included DX. and
Yep,
Your
it's not in
comment did
this.
not include DX.
Yeah, I guess. I don't
So
know
it
why I did
looks-
that.
Looks like you guys are pretty comfortable with this, or if you protect against a single unit.
Yeah, I would also say the red lines aren't, the things that are crossed out are not right, but it's
How do you
fine.
mean?
And the second one, it says they're both 10. The bonus are both 10, it should be 12, but I'm sure you'll figure out things to change.
All right, so going once, going twice. We're cool. Okay, next.
Okay. The next item is really kind of a cleanup item, unless anyone has any comments on it or feels that it hasn't. All right, now I gotta make sure it's actually in here.
So,
Hold on. My apologies, it looks like that one is not actually included in here, but I had language for that. I don't,
Oh, the
It was
parking one?
somewhere in there. No, the lower finishes.
no, the lower finishes I have, it's the parking one I had language on that.
The
and I
flexibility
don't
for
s-
affordable
I don't
units
see
to
it in
have-
here.
The,
Ooh, approximately, what is the language you?
So the I mean, the language was simply to note that the parking was only where the parking was required.
Okay.
And that was done, that was,
provided,
yeah,
yeah.
right. I'm sorry, provided, yeah, where
Yep.
the parking was provided.
Yeah, it was, I think that was pretty straightforward and controversial.
Next.
Okay, then the next one is the finishes one. This is again kind of a cleanup item, ensuring that it's not just the appliances that can vary, but the finishes as well, as long as they're generally equivalent. Any concerns on that language?
I'm a little, I mean,
Okay.
what would that generally flexible be? We don't want them to be obviously,
Yeah,
not equal,
No.
single
Why
out
is it-
people.
Well, I mean, finishes would be in interior finishes. The market rate unit might have, reclaimed hardwood floors, and the affordable may have LVT.
So, yeah, I mean, if you have like an ultra luxury building with like marble, whatever,
Yeah.
you're basically, if you require also marble in the affordable ones, you're pushing people toward in lieu payment, which seems less than ideal.
Right.
Maybe.
There was,
I mean,
you
but
know,
you're getting higher rent for the marble units.
to offset your affordable housing, right.
But a person that's not doing a high-end luxury building, that's doing regular finishes,
Then they might have regular, it might make sense for them to do regular finishes all the way around.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, the same idea with the appliances, they have to be of new and of good quality, quote unquote. But you don't need a Viking stove. Particularly incidentally, I mean, if you start trying to line that up with the notional cost of appliances and rents and that sort of thing, that you probably need a standardized set of affordable, everyone understands, particularly if you're going all in and saying this is a utilities included affordable unit. The
That's
Hackett session today, by the way, we had a lot about this section, but it's not ready for presentation.
Yeah, I'm good with this.
Yeah.
okay.
Moving on.
So equivalency and concurrency, I think this was mine. The idea here, so for required affordable units, I think we want them to be equivalent and concurrent, happen at the same time. But for bonus units in the R zones, I think that doesn't really make sense. There's no incentive here. We're not giving people things in exchange for those. They're just, if you want to provide us affordable units, you can. And so if you have a plan to build, 3 townhouses and you have extra space in the back and you want to give that extra land to Habitat, Habitat should be able to use their standard, model, like architectural plans that Carl made for them, or, build it as they see fit, rather than having to match the way you've built the other units in the building when you might not even be, like, the same people aren't even constructing it, right? A nonprofit's building one, you're a developer's building the other. You know, I don't see the point of imposing these requirements on units that are just extra affordable units that are nice to have, right?
Right.
We're not
So
getting
does the
something.
language that you feel, does the language provided here meet your?
I would prefer my proposal. So the language here is basically the administrator can waive it if they feel it's good.
Consistent with the comp plan and the affordable housing plan, yeah.
And I would say simply move it under the section of required affordable units, because that's what it should be applying to.
It's also, I mean, somebody who, a homeowner may decide to put a couple tiny houses in the backyard, and then that's, you know, do those, they're definitely not gonna match the primary structure on the lot.
But we're not, but, so now we're basically saying where there's separates the units in it, that they could not follow these standards. Like, the scenarios you guys are both describing are separate buildings.
As long as, you know, even if it's a, you know, built-in ADU in a sort of, you know, English basement apartment or something, and they want to make that permanently affordable, I don't see why, I mean, as long as they're making it permanently affordable, I don't see why we should be saying, well, this, you know, affordable unit, this affordable accessory unit is not the same square footage as the upper house that's above it, therefore it's not compliant with the code unless there's a waiver. I don't,
So the objectives of that section of the ordinance, the reason that exists is so that one can't go to a mixed income project and say, oh, those are the affordable units, right? That's the objective. We don't want them to be identifiable and picked out. And if you go
So-
to most projects in the city, that's not the case.
I
We
think,
meet that objective.
I think that makes a lot of sense
And-
when you're talking about a building where we're requiring 10% of the units to be affordable. If we're talking about a bunch of sublots on a property, I don't think that makes sense, right? Like, you know,
Well,
if,
just set a threshold for a number of units and be done with it. It doesn't have to be the more than 10. I mean, you could say 6, if it's under 6, under 5, you know, pick a number.
so I think the fundamental difference here is some of them are the 10% we're requiring to be mixed in,
Yes.
which is part of the requirement. And then some of them are well, you can build extra units in low-density R zones if they're affordable. And so for those,
Yeah, that's why the number of units sort of fixes that problem. Because in RA, you're going to have a maximum of 6 units if you maximize your affordability.
But at RC, you go up to like 12, can't you, but you don't get a bonus. You just go up to 12 if you want. Isn't that right?
no, that's with the bonus.
That's with
It's
the bonus.
8 and then 10 with the existing preservation bonus, and then it's 12 with
But I mean, you don't
affordability.
get like you don't get extra height or anything like it's not like it's
Yeah, it's
somewhat
just-
voluntary if you're gonna provide extra, if you're gonna provide. affordable
You're just
uses.
voluntarily providing affordable units, and we're adding a requirement on top of that to make it more restrictive.
Yeah, which, I mean, it would seem to me that these would not be large developments. Therefore, the way to deal with that is exempt projects with less than X units and just, fine, that applies. It doesn't apply for a 25 unit.
Well, I think the way to do it is just to exempt the R zones, and then, because if you have a 10-unit project in a CX zone, then you do want that one unit to be mixed in and concurrent and equivalent, because it's the required
Right.
affordable unit.
Right, I think we're going backwards. I'm saying there is no mixed-in requirement, there's no consistency requirement if it's 6 or fewer units to pick something out of and it's not a problem. It achieves what you want it to achieve.
Well, but then you don't get it in our C zones, where we would love people to have that extra affordable unit.
So
Using
so
that
your
bonus.
objection is that somebody who may want to build 10 units on a RC is going to say, but I have to have consistency. Yeah, well, I'm pretty comfortable 10 units on a residential lot in RC that it's going to have I'm perfectly capable of requiring
So-
that in that circumstance.
So if
If that's
you're
not a
an
low
RC
hit.
developer and you can build 2 rows of 4 townhomes or something on a lot, and then you have extra space in the back and you want to sell it to the land trust for them to build their own thing on, the land trust has to match your architectural plans?
So you're saying that there's an RC zone in the city that would allow that?
Yeah. you can go up to 12 with the affordable bonus, but the incremental units must all be affordable, which is why I don't think it makes sense to oppose additional requirements on units that are required to be 100% affordable anyway with no incentive.
Yeah, I guess I'm
It's just-
characterizing it separate as, look, you got 2 or 3 units that are sort of, it's eclectic, and that's that. It's a whole different thing. I didn't really consider the idea, I mean, but I'm still, I mean, that is then an apartment complex, and I think that.
Well, it's not,
12
it's townhome court.
You said 2 rows, and then something that you've given to Habitat or PHA to build on. All right, colloquially, that's a 12-unit apartment complex or a 12-unit development. It's 3 different buildings on one I mean, that's, right, to me, that stigmatizes the affordable units in that case. That's done on an entirely different scale.
Doesn't Habitat do this all the time? Like in Rockland, they do this. They have a bunch of market rate houses, and then there's a couple of Habitat duplexes scattered throughout.
Yeah, look at Flint Hill, where the Habitat ones are 2/2s versus the others that are standard townhomes.
But there's no requirement written into this that Habitat provide the affordable units. And I
No.
can't put
Well,
that
so,
requirement
okay,
in.
let's
So,
back
but-
up to the English
so-
basement scenario, right? You have English basement units, they're not equivalent to the other units, but they can be made permanently affordable at 60% AMI, and we're gonna say it should be illegal to provide those?
What I'm providing is a waiver pathway to that, rather than what I'm concerned about is creating basically saying, in these districts, there are no requirements for equivalency or concurrency whatsoever, which also means I could simply come in and say, yeah, I'm in the process of transferring that property over to somebody, affordable housing builder. That property, it'll be dealt with eventually.
And yes, but in that case, you're still only up to your buy right limit, and only an affordable housing developer can build those units, right? You can't get a CO for them as market rate units, because that's above your limit.
Understood. but
So,
then-
so you could build something and then 10 years later say, oh, I would love for the land trust to build something here,
Okay, so,
and that wouldn't be
How does that-
concurrent.
It would not be concurrent. Wherein is the advantage for the city of actually achieving the affordable units then?
Well, the alternative is no affordable units at all and no change, right? You could simply
Yeah.
not build the affordable units. You don't get to use the bonus.
So, seems to be, and again, I think back to the great work that Greenville did when they did their redevelopment. The affordable units look just like, including the finishes and appliances, look just like the market rate units. I'm pretty comfortable going with the language that Mr. Freeze has written, but we need to land
Yeah,
this. So let's
so his language
do this
is.
on page 2, second from the top. Section 4.22, C1, little c.
All right. Hold on. I think I may be on the wrong,
Second page.
and I'm on page 2 of the, all right.
PDF, not the Word document.
Yeah, I'm on the PDF.
Page 3 of the PDF,
Page 3 of the
third
PDF.
paragraph.
Okay.
3 of the paragraph, okay. There we go. Sorry about that.
And this is exactly what they did in Greenville.
Well, project
Mr.
demonstration
Freeze's
for project
recommendation.
Intent section, yes, okay, I'm with you.
And their objective was just to avoid the stigma of living next door to a market rate unit versus living next door to
All right.
a subsidized unit.
And while we're at it, I would suggest, and I know this is sort of adding to our, that in the equivalency of units section, we add this the language that's at the very top of page, what are we doing? It's marked 3, right above the equivalency of units, when a project demonstrates affordability goals, a comprehensive plan, blah, blah, blah. I think we ought to stick that in the equivalency.
Right, we
Yeah.
need to make a decision.
Right.
We got
This one.
Mr. Stolzenberg's request. And we've got the NDS colleagues' recommendation. We need to figure out which one we're gonna go with.
So, when a project demonstrates the affordability, yeah, I'm comfortable with importing that language.
With Mr. Freeze's
Yeah.
language. Mr. Schwartz,
I'm with Lori.
Mr. Palmer. I mean, Mr. Habab. Looking right at you.
For now, I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation. And
Mr. Soliage.
I see strengths on either. I'm leaning towards Rory's solution.
I mean, I just don't see why you would
Putting this thing right down the middle.
disincentivize affordable units that they're only providing. We're not giving anything away to get them, like, right? So we're saying if you don't meet our strict requirements about this and the administrator doesn't agree or doesn't like them in some way because they're visually different or something, then just don't provide them at all. And I don't see the benefit.
I mean, I appreciate that we're not giving anything away, but I'm looking at this from the perspective of the person who's living in the subsidized housing unit, and they don't have the fancy countertops.
Well, the person won't have it at all if the housing unit at all, if we tell them not to build it because we don't like it enough. Right?
Again, I think that we need to make a distinction between an eclectic RA yacht lot that may have 3 units on it, where that is consistent. It's an RA lot. They're gonna be different looking houses, so that's the same, even though, and a larger development where I think we need to be a little tighter.
So I think that distinction is the R zones versus the other zones. If you have 8 by right and they're townhouses, and then you get 2 extra as a bonus, they're gonna be a duplex and not townhouses. In that way alone, they'll be different, right? And then Habitat presumably would want to use its already paid for architected plans to build a duplex.
I'm talking myself out of it. What about a large parcel in R? So like a large subdivision. How would that?
So, I mean, again, your market rate units or whatever, if you don't allow affordable units, that's all you get. Or if they choose not to build any affordable units, that's all they get. And then we may get incremental affordable units.
Can you identify for me what language in C says that Habitat can't use their off-the-shelf architectural plans?
Well, they wouldn't be equivalent or potentially concurrent
Why
because
would
they're
they
probably
not-
building them separately
Why would they not be equivalent?
because they're physically different.
They don't have to be
Affordable unit must
identical.
reflect the composition of the overall project units and number of bedrooms, exterior appearance, and overall, must reflect, not identical.
What if the number of bedrooms is different?
I mean, we've offered a waiver in here.
Well,
Hmm.
I mean,
But-
that's actually a fairly substantial issue, particularly with larger projects, because that you can, even if you're stacking on a fairly large, you're like, look, this is a 2-bedroom with walk-in closets and high-end finishes, and above it is a 3-bedroom unit without those walk-in closets, and all 3 bedrooms are a little smaller. That, to me, is perfectly reasonable, because that's the affordable unit. And you're trying to get more bodies in there.
All right, I'd like to get a neutral opinion. Mr. Ballmer, do you have any thoughts?
Not particularly, I think, which is mentioned, seems reasonable. The waiver.
All right, let's
We-
we've
we
spent
could-
almost 30 minutes on this.
just to throw this out there, maybe, and we could take RA out of this and say RA doesn't need the waiver, and then everything else does because they're bigger complexes. And we still have the waiver option if we want to make it a little easier for most of the city.
So RB and RC, this applies to RB and RC.
Yeah,
I could live with that, actually.
it's kind of
I
the
live
middle
with
of
that
the
too.
road a little bit.
Yeah,
This
I
is
can,
moving along.
yeah,
That gets us moving along.
all right.
The text
Alright.
of that's going to get a little complicated,
Ooh,
but
does that make sense? Is it doable? Is it manageable?
Can you state it again? What were you suggesting?
That we keep the waiver for RB and RC, but RA is Rory's language.
Which is to say, basically exempt from section C and D.
Yeah.
Section
that practical and manageable?
I mean, in terms of writing it, yeah.
No, managing and enforcing it.
I mean, we can, it would just be the rules, right?
Everybody comfortable with Kareem's recommendation?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Mr. Schwartz?
I think that's the only way we're gonna move on.
Okay.
I think it's gonna make it unnecessarily complicated, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense. Hopefully, Mr. Freeze will be granting the waivers liberally so we actually get affordable units, but,
Well, that's certainly the intent of the comprehensive plan and the affordable housing plan,
yeah.
which I'm directed to be consistent with.
Then I guess I don't know what the criticism is then. If getting the affordable units is the intent, when would it not be?
What's that?
When would it not match the
I
intent?
think the issue here, and I think the chair and I are sort of vocalized this, you do not want to open even a small door for stigmatizing and differentiation. That what you're doing is you're building a second-class building, and you can't have the appearance of it being a second-class building, period. That is not furthering an affordable housing goal. That is stigmatizing the people who live there.
All right, it looks like we don't have consensus, but we've got a majority in favor of Mr. Bob's recommendation. Would you repeat that to make certain that we've all got it?
That the waiver process that Mr. Freeze and staff suggested apply to RB and RC, and that in RA districts, the language that Rory suggested that is taking out section C and D applies there. That makes sense.
All right, next.
All right, and so the last item is the item that you guys
We landed that.
landed previously, so this simply puts the language in.
Okay.
My concern for this one is that it requires that right of first refusal, which makes me wonder if it now prohibits those 99-year terms. Like, do we see this language as more flexible to cover both of those cases?
Both cases.
So, the model where it's simply required to be sold to a qualifying household at a qualifying price versus there's a right of first refusal. There are two models, and we want to accommodate both of them.
So, that on the first resale, there would be a right of first refusal.
Yes. For the model we didn't accommodate before and want to accommodate. My concern is that in the other model, that's not necessarily part of that, as far as I'm aware.
I'm sorry, you without specificity with the other, you're.
So the model of, there's simply a deed restriction that says you have to sell it to a qualifying household at a qualifying price. There's not necessarily a right of first refusal to sell it back to the initial, like the builder. You simply have to.
So I envision the right of first refusal is not necessarily to the developer. It doesn't have to be to the developer.
Or the city, true, yeah.
The city or whoever. And that's just to give the city that touch on that property at its first turnover. And I think that, if you try to impose these 99-year affordability, the real issue is that you're putting your thumb on the market, and then, okay, well, what if the houses...
I'm not saying we should impose that. I'm just saying we should also allow that. Right?
Also-
Like, so in the land trust contract, is there a right of first refusal right now in their current contract?
I have no idea.
That's my question.
So what would you modify in what Mr. Freeze has written here?
Well, and this is the language from the HAC.
Right, so let's get down
That's
to...
on page 1, term of affordability.
Yep.
No, I guess they actually do have a right of first refusal. All right,
Right,
well, whatever.
right. Where do we go from here, Mr. Freeze?
Right, well, that wraps up what I have on the ADU section. Are there any other comments or questions or
Well,
Okay. With no
things
more
of humor that we should discuss?
We're not in the.
No, it took us so long. I'm sorry.
We're
That
not
was,
in the- let's keep going.
yeah,
What's,
All right.
one little
Next
section
up,
took 30
are we on blocks and
minutes.
blocks and connectivity. No, perhaps this one will go quicker.
Yep.
So this one was I think really there were some kind of technical corrections that were identified. Did you folks understand these, or I don't know that I need to really get into
It
depth
seems
as to
fine.
what's here,
Yeah.
right?
Fine with them.
Um,
There's a typo, commensurate, not commiserate.
Oh, yeah, that's,
I
thank you.
recommend
oh,
corresponding.
prove, yes, prove that's a
Corresponding, I like that
typo.
better.
Well, you know.
It is a challenge. Yeah, it's a challenge when spell check doesn't recognizes that it's a word, even if it's the wrong one.
Yeah.
Corresponding is what I'm gonna go with, though. I like that word. Thank you, Commissioner Sola Yates. On the last bullet there, Carl, this was your comment. Is that, you understand that we've gone with the more flexible option?
Yeah,
That's why we didn't
I-
reflect a change.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. See, that one didn't take half an hour.
Number
All right.
3, which is what?
Number 3 is streets. There were no,
What page is that?
So, I
page
don't,
3.
what's the, it's page 4 of the packet, though.
I numbered the bottom of the pages. That's what I'm going with.
Yeah. So you're talking about 240 Shrubling, the street grade waiver we approved.
That was a question that
Yeah,
was
that was my
raised by Commissioner, sorry, that's not clear. Commissioner Schwartz had asked the question, what did we use, what was the street grade we arrived at for 240 Stripling when you guys were considering the waiver in that case? It was 10%, therefore no changes necessary. to
So
the
my
code.
concern is that we are still making it more restrictive than that, right? Because before the administrator, staff could give a waiver to 10%, and then that could be appealed. And now we seem to be saying that you can give a waiver to 10%, and that cannot be appealed. So 240 Shrubling could not have happened. And look, I've spent 2 months in a wheelchair. I'm all for flattening everything. I think I said it back then, too. Just the whole city should be flat. But
Okay.
They just scoop us all up and drop us outside Leavenworth, Kansas or something?
just gonna get a whole bunch of bulldozers.
Hey, there's all kinds of problems that you can solve by simply picking the city up and moving it to a more affordable location. All right.
Yeah.
Of course,
Right,
all
the
the
next-
trees would be
bulldozers
preserved
for
as
that
we
matter.
flatten
You can solve a lot
everything.
of
That
The
was,
problems.
maximum
Bulldozers
allowable
are
street grade is
10%.
8%. In areas with existing steep topography, the administrator may allow a grade of up to 10%. That is what's in the current.
in the
Yeah.
current, yeah, but then there's another section that says like, all these things can be appealed to the planning commission, and I don't think that's there anymore. And I don't know if that was intentional because there was talk of removing our ability to hear an appeal, or if that's just because those appeals in general were removed. I can find the code section.
In the existing code?
Mhm.
But there's a provision today that says, no.
You can appeal up to 10. You can appeal the denial of the waiver up to 10%.
I got you.
You're asking to add that back in.
Right, so right now, the appeal of an administrator's decision goes to the BZA, if I'm not wrong. That's probably that's a blanket rule across the ordinance at this point.
Interesting.
And
If that's
so it wasn't, there
true, I'm
wasn't,
okay with
there
it.
was not an intention to remove that appeal right. It's just
Okay.
recognizing that all administrative decisions are now appealable to the BZA.
Is that true even on a street that isn't zoned? It's not part of a lot?
These are development standards.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm fine with the BZA hearing it. I have no problem with that, as long as there's a process.
All right, and then the second bullet there under number 3 is about the greenscape zone preserving existing trees. This was a comment from the tree commission, certainly seemed reasonable, so we simply added it as a standard. Go ahead.
The greatest extent possible sounds a little weird. Is the sidewalk gonna have to zigzag to like get the strip if there's trees that are not in a perfect line?
That may be the question.
How about
Right.
Curve around.
feasible? It would make me feel better than possible, because you could certainly do a lot that's possible,
That's
or practicable, or
feasible, as is feasible. That works. Parking access.
So this was a clarification. The question was raised, all right. The table at 451C2 is referring to, it says C district in the pedestrian access type 1. It's just noting that where in the district one looks would be the entrance standards, and that defines the spacing between those pedestrian access types. So this is just it's just clarifying language. The question that's raised, so in the next item, so the bottom of page 3, basically presented a choice here. So this last sentence of that line, so I'll read the whole thing. Where a retaining wall, open drainage, or similar obstacle interrupts a required access way, the connection must be designed to facilitate passage through or over the obstacle. So where we're required to provide a pedestrian access way to the street, and it's interrupted by one of these things, that language applies, right? But if the connection is not ADA compliant, a separate compliant access way must be provided. That language was added based on a comment provided by our ADA coordinator position in the city, right? So I think Commissioner Schwartz raised a reasonable concern with that requirement as being a strict requirement. So there's two options for dealing with that. One is to remove the line entirely and simply rely on the general ADA rules. The other one is to make this something that can be decided by the administrator in working with the applicant. Carl, in particular, if you could look at these.
Yeah, so my concern was just if you've got something blocking you from having accessible access from the right of way to the building, like maybe the buildings, I guess we're not gonna have deep setbacks anymore, but maybe it's an existing site that they're redoing enough that there's still a parking lot that has an accessible parking space.
I mean, there's any number of, the illustration shows us a relatively deep setback, and I mean, it shows an example of what you're describing, so,
So
go ahead.
there might be a place where it's nearly impossible to get a ADA route from the street to the building. So my suggestion was, can there be, if that is the case, can we have an option where someone provides their required ADA route from the ADA parking to the building?
So, I agree with Carl's suggestion, except that, and it's a bit of a semantic difference. I would rather it be required and waivable by the administrator if there are obstacles, rather than the administrator may require it if they feel like it.
I'm fine with that. As long as there's some sort of, way to fix it if it is impossible.
So required, but waivable. So basically, the other way around from,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
On to page, where are we? We're on number 5 now? Or is there more
What was it?
spacing and driveways we need to
Yeah,
talk
this
about?
is just a cleanup item.
Okay.
All right, number 5, transitions and screening. So there were a number of these here, but, so we provided answers to basically each one of the questions that was raised.
As long as, so I think I was confused. I think I'm still confused, but as long as you can access a parking lot from an alleyway, then I'm good.
Absolutely, you can, with two lanes even, yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Fences and walls.
All right. Chain link fences? So,
Lyle loves them.
so we're proposing to remove that line.
Yes.
Why, well, it seems like when we remove that line, we're also removing the requirement for vinyl coating. So I
True.
guess that means bare metal. Do we want to still require vinyl coating, even if we're allowing them wherever?
No. Not particularly.
It's
Yeah, I
such
mean,
a
it's still
standard
big.
thing in every neighborhood in the city to have a metal chain link fence.
Yeah, and the vinyl coating frankly is putting lipstick on a pig anyway. And speaking as a guy with a chain link fence, I mean,
Is it vinyl coated?
it is not.
Seems like a conflict of interest.
Well, if I move or change that fence in any way, I'll confess.
All right, the next item is a very technical item. Ate up more time than I anticipated.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. This is what we're here for, right?
Oh, no.
We're digging into the details, but this is a situation where it's dealing with fence height on top of a retaining wall. And the question was raised about, well, what if that height as set in there ends up making your fence too low to sufficiently serve as a guardrail?
Mhm.
So we basically have addressed that issue, I believe.
Yeah.
All right. All right, and that just repeats, and then this is a missing word in 481D2. And then a correction to make sure that it's clear that when we're defining the area of the fence, it's excluding those portions that stick up above the fence.
Learned a new word today.
So, and just for the 481D2,
Yeah,
so if the fence is 10 feet into the yard and on a little rise, is it still measured from the alleyway? That was,
yeah,
Yeah, that is an exact sort of tempest in a teapot that could show up a year. Yes, I see your point.
yeah.
With an annoyed neighbor, too.
I remember discussing this issue with our consultant. Oh, right, and well, and there it is. So there's the bullet. Do we need to add case? So her very short answer was she didn't believe it was necessary.
Why would someone build the fence, putting a bunch of their yard on the alley side of the fence?
Right.
they probably wouldn't, but this is just the way my mind works.
Park on one, you have a dog, yeah, and you park in the alley,
Yep.
in the back of your yard, your yard.
Okay, yeah.
You have like
you
a
park,
scrap
yeah.
heap back there and put all the stuff.
You dump,
all I see.
Is that allowed?
you dump all your grass clippings over your fence.
I would be content if staff would just look at that and make sure it's covered.
All right. All right.
Well, next thing.
You ready for the next
Or,
item?
well, just got a comment on that.
On the next item under fences, or are we moving to landscaping?
Okay.
Moving on.
Yeah, and I'm happy with what you did for the
Right.
finials and posts.
Why don't we like irrigation systems?
So I did not
was
suggest
me.
that we need to,
I thought that if you're gonna plant something, it needs to survive.
oh, wait, I did actually.
So, I mean, if we have a
Yeah.
drought, that's one thing, it's just like, we shouldn't have,
Dependent
landscaping that
on it,
requires
yeah.
irrigation.
Citywide?
Yeah.
What if you want to show off your sweet gray water system you put in?
Then there's, I don't know, James can
I-
waive it.
I don't know,
I mean, this was one
I'm not gonna fall my sword over it, it just seemed like it was,
This is for city-required trees and planting, right? Not your personal,
Is it- It's for required landscaping, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay then.
I mean, it seems like it's,
guess.
yeah, you shouldn't put something in that's not meant for the environment.
Yeah.
But I think, actually, but the point, well,
Mm-hmm.
I
Trees
mean, one
nearby.
concern there
Yeah.
is like we do talk about living walls as our blank wall thing, which may or may not be covered by this. Those
No.
die all the time
That
and
I-
probably need to be
I
irrigated.
think we did cover last
we
week.
covered last week and we allowed the irrigation system for that.
If you guys,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
again, this isn't a deal killer for me, it just seemed like it was best practice, but if it's, James, if you feel like it's a bad idea to scratch that, then,
Well, and during drought conditions, we just declare an emergency and tell you not to water.
Yeah.
No, I think, I mean, what this is without saying it, I think you're trying to steer folks towards native plantings.
Mm-hmm.
Right, without saying native plantings.
Well, and making sure there's enough soil and enough.
Sure.
You're not putting a roof over the top of the plants.
Yeah, you're not relying on,
Things that you just shouldn't be doing in the first place.
on someone turning on the system for our required plants to stay alive.
Yeah.
And they could provide it, they just doesn't, you know, it has
Yeah.
to rely on,
Be a backup.
yeah.
I don't really care either way, I just.
Yeah, that's a good point. It doesn't prohibit the installation of an irrigation system. It simply notes that you have to make your plant selections, your soil volume, your so on and so forth, with the idea that it should be able to survive on. Okay.
So we're good keeping the scratch out of or an irrigation system must be provided?
I'm good with it.
Okay.
Yeah. No concerns with the adding harmonious, sustainable, and resilient to the intent of tree preservation?
No.
They're all pretty words.
They are. And again, we were looking at some ability to allow for greater than 20-foot trees under overhead utility lines in certain circumstances. This was item.
Are those
from-
really tall power lines?
I'm
not
thinking
fine
High
with it,
Street.
Here we
Like
go.
if someone cuts down a tree on High Street, we'll never be able to replace it.
but-
That was the point, yep.
Signs.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is this you again?
A lot of it, yeah. I think you answered a bunch of these.
So the first one was a question of what is an off-premise sign. That is answered there.
Jeff handed me a bunch of the existing language. It doesn't make sense to me, and I feel like we see these things all the time, and no one's been reading the actual regs. But if it's existing language, then fine.
And
So what specifically are you talking about?
There's things about, like certain signs are not allowed in the ADC districts and the IPPs, like monument signs or freestanding signs. And
But your general assessment is not only are the rules not being followed, the people enforcing the rules.
well, I
aren't
don't mean it
following
like
the
that.
rules.
No.
In an
Maybe they were
ADC
there for a long
anyway.
time. I don't know. It just seems like they're, like, you know, the Omni is in an ADC district. It's got a monument sign. The Jefferson Schools and IPP has a monument sign. So things like, it just seemed a little odd to me.
And signs in ADCs and non-IPPs have to be reviewed anyway, right?
Well,
So,
that was my thinking, so.
they are all reviewed, yes.
so I would generally agree with you there.
So
Personally, I
what are
don't
we,
hate
what are,
signs as much as
what are you
everyone else
agreeing?
seems to.
What are we doing?
Okay.
Wait.
Let's go to the, I think it might be easier just to.
The side of the room's confused.
So, going to the red lines, large temporary signs are not permitted in the residential ADC and IPPs. My question about that was, what if we have a big event sign on the mall? Isn't that a large temporary sign?
Which we do all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
So that seemed just, yeah, as, the proposed, not, I don't know if it's proposed, the red line shows striking it from ADC and IPP.
Right.
I would be content with that.
And honestly, when I read this, it's actually not clear to me whether this was meant to say that only residential ADC districts or IPPs
Mhm.
where that was prohibited. But it's,
Okay.
it's somewhat ambiguous as to
Yeah,
what the intent
comma,
was, but I.
ADC or, yeah, I
Right.
think, I read it as not something else other than residential, I think.
Right.
But
Hmm.
I'm perfectly prepared to have someone argue the other way and win.
I read it the other way.
Oh, well, so in the original module, 2, 3, it was residential ADC, or, sorry, it was just ADC districts, and it was changed to, wait, what? This red line makes no sense, actually. I don't know. I'm not even gonna speculate on what this says,
Would
but.
this block churches in R from putting up signs? Because
That's a good question.
churches put up signs.
So Shiner, for example, big sign up every day, something different.
That's a good
Well,
question.
temporary signs, I guess.
Well, it's a temporary sign, they put up something different.
Yeah.
Or it's like a big Happy Easter banner or something.
Yeah.
Temporary signs must be
Yeah, churches-
rectangular.
I believe the definition was 32 square feet. That's pretty good.
4 by 8.
Well, it's interesting also, I'm now noticing, the start of that section is a large temporary sign is any sign with an area of greater than 10 square feet which is placed to blah, blah, blah. Then 3 under that says large temporary signs must not exceed 32 square feet. Oh, wait, so 10 to 32. Yeah,
Okay,
that
okay.
does make
That's
sense.
pretty big.
Well, 10 feet isn't that big, right? 2 by
10 feet,
5 or
30.
32 is pretty big, yeah.
Well, it's a sheet of plywood.
4 by 8, yeah,
Yeah.
which is,
But it's, I mean, we see those on the mall. I feel like we see those a lot.
Well, that, yeah, I mean, when I read through that, that was the first thing I went to is the sign they put on the elevator.
Oh,
one that comes to mind is fraternities often put pieces of plywood painted into a sign for their
Whatever.
spring
Brunch.
bamboo parties or
Yeah.
whatever, yeah.
I'm
Okay.
guessing they don't have any permit for that.
Probably not.
So, do we, I mean, the options on the table are to simply strike the historic districts or to strike the entire line.
if this is based on existing language, I'm happy just to strike the historic districts.
I can live with that. If it's a problem, we can change it later.
Looks like you got yeses all the way around.
The awning thing was not my comment, but that makes sense, that you could put a sign on the side of an awning.
Yep.
So, temporary signs are currently not prohibited, except for ADC districts, if I'm reading this right. Temporary signs not over 32 square feet, not over 10 square feet in an ADC district are permitted. So we have no residential restriction, from what I can tell, unless that's separately.
I don't think you can get temporary sign.
Maybe it's in a different section?
So, yeah, you're reading the
Your
existing,
Signage in residential is limited to the 1 by 2 foot in a window with a home occupation.
Okay.
General limitation and low density.
And then otherwise, for non-dwelling uses, it's 12 square feet, so I guess that would be like a church.
Yeah.
12 by 3. Signs.
The, all wall signs for a single building must be coordinated as to color and lettering. You know, you get a building, like the Flats has, you know, every sign is a different brand, different. Each business has their own branding on their sign panel. So there's coordination, and it obviously goes through a, not master sign plan, what is it? Comprehensive sign plan. So there is some coordination, but the language didn't seem necessary to me. The suspended pole sign must be located in a landscape bed. I guess that's existing language, but again, does it matter if we put it in grass?
yeah, it didn't strike me as terribly.
Okay. Illumination, Jeff disagrees with me, so I won't push this, but I swear that we allow internally lit signs as long as it's only the letters that are lit up. So the Jefferson School has this, the Marriott has this. In the daylight, it looks like a big red plastic sign with the Marriott in white letters, and at night, you just see Marriott. You don't see the red glow from the,
I believe that is what we have in the ordinance. I gotta think where
Yeah,
that
they're
section is.
prohibited in certain districts, in downtown corner, West Main. Oh, except in West Main, internally lit channel letters are allowed.
which I guess is what we have on the Marriott.
And then entrance corridors, internally signs when permitted shall have an opaque background.
This really shouldn't be different from district to district.
Did we
either.
redo the sign ordinance in like 2007? Is that right?
We've had a few attempts at redoing, and it still needs some love. That is a larger discussion.
Yeah, maybe we just make a note to go deal with signs at some point in the next couple of years. And, I mean, maybe small changes now if you, I have no problem with any of
Ooh,
these.
we were talking about illumination. Did you get an answer to that?
I think that's what we're,
Okay, I
James, I
mean,
think, is looking at existing, language.
Well, I'm looking at the ordinance as presented.
while he's doing that, I'm curious about your comment about red. You don't like, I mean,
Oh, that was, yeah, sorry, I went off on a tangent there. I didn't realize that was only reserved for emergency colors, because I swear that Mary Joy had a problem with, she allowed it for, Five Guys when they used to be on the mall. And she used to always say that she regretted that. So I thought that was just I thought that was an aesthetic thing, that we don't allow red light.
but it's a safety thing, safety
Well, that's what
signaling.
the
Yeah.
staff's comment was,
Yeah,
is that it's a
that's-
safety thing,
Okay,
so, okay.
So illumination, forgive me for digressing, illumination.
Yeah, here it is, in the illumination, 41111D, for internally lit signs on a background, the background must be opaque.
That's what I'm remembering.
Yeah,
That's what we require in entrance corridors currently.
So, that's where yes, it seems like you'd want to strike internally lit signs are not allowed in an ADC district, and either replace it with that language, or,
so just strike E entirely, which is what, as I have here.
yeah, I mean, but, will
That's-
that language make it back into the code, about the opaque background?
That's what I just read, this, I'm reading from the code right now.
Oh, sorry.
The
Got
draft
it.
code,
Got it. Good. Got it, yes.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Outdoor lighting.
Oh my God.
Yeah, okay,
This
this
is
is what,
YouTube.
James is really probably gonna kill me. This is all me.
I don't know how I'm developing this reputation.
Well, okay, moving on, okay, string lights are not prohibited, great. It seemed to me that, holiday decorative lights still probably need to meet our regulations, like we shouldn't have big old spotlights or something just because it's a holiday light.
Scrooge.
Sounds like you're trying to kill the Christmas light
I am the
decoration
Grinch.
race.
I am the Grinch. Flag lighting, this is my pet peeve, because there's a couple spots where you got a big spotlight and it just shines in my eyes when I'm walking by, but I feel like that's probably infringing on, that could, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll just note, our comments are, as much, I showed, obviously, that could be removed, but our suggestion is that we allow the flag lighting.
Yeah.
The security lighting, my concern is just in the R districts, and yeah, I understand that the 6,000 lumens is really bright, and 15 minutes is kind of long, and I'm just thinking, when you have the neighbor whose security light flashes all night long, it's obscene. So I don't know if,
Yeah, that
I'll-
doesn't, yeah.
So, just, so the language, security lighting controlled by sensors, I mean, I don't know much about security lighting, but the sense is that one wants something that lights up dramatically, right? Because that's the point of security lighting. So that's why that language is in there, to the extent that it is. But
6,000 is really bright.
yeah.
that's, again, that's my understanding as to why people have security lighting.
It is. Maybe we can't tackle it tonight, but I think at some point we need to figure out if there's a way to word it so that it's not shining into your neighbor's windows. Because that's where, I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
If it's a
lumens
motion
are
detector,
over
it's
X,
like my
yeah.
neighbors have a motion detector on the alleyway behind my house. And fortunately, I don't have any windows that really face back there, but my neighbors, their whole house is illuminated anytime someone walks down the alleyway.
Yeah.
Or a large animal, or, you know. Although it has prevented their cars from being broken into anymore. So that wasn't wrong beforehand. So I get the point.
I agree that 6,000 is very, very high. I just Googled what a regular bulb is, and it's like 270.
Right.
How about 3,000? Let's just reduce the lumens.
That is a 200-watt bulb, so that seems bright enough.
I mean, an interesting thing here, right, is like, if it's a big parking lot fixture or something, like for a large area, like a commercial area,
It
maybe
needs to be-
6 a lot, like
it
a
needs to be
big
as
bulb
bright
like
as it
that
needs
makes
to be,
sense.
yeah.
But then in a residential area, that seems kind of out of scale, and we don't have any differentiation there. I don't know. I guess in a parking lot, you wouldn't have motion activated lighting though.
Well, yeah, I mean, you might, and I don't care about this as much in a commercial district as I do in someone's,
Yeah, like
their
side yard, yeah.
Does section B3 address this at all?
Well, these lights are exempt, so
Oh, gotcha.
I would assume not.
So what do you guys think about Lyle's recommendation?
In the R districts, take it down to 3,000?
I think that makes sense.
I'd take it down further, but I'll live with 3,000.
Compromise. Mr. Breeze, can we go to compromise? What was the number again?
3,000.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that worries me is like, you can always scale it up later. This is the one time I'm actually worried that people will put in lights and then they will stick with those lights forever. Whereas other things, you know, a building, you can.
3,000 is the consensus.
Did we gloss over the Christmas thing? Are we really banning Christmas lights? or
No.
whatever?
Oh, that.
I,
No, holiday lights that don't, so like string lights and whatnot are not part of they're exempt. So I'm thinking of something that's
Yeah,
an
like a
unshielded light
big
that's,
Santa
as long
light
as
up
it's
guy.
under,
1600 lumens?
Yeah, under
They should be.
1600
I
lumens.
mean, I don't, yeah, that's fine.
There's some pretty bright Christmas lights. People seem to like them. I mean, I'm Jewish. I don't care, but
I like them, I think they're fun.
I like them as well. I think they're fun.
so, don't delete the words holiday lighting.
Okay.
There you go.
Light color, yeah, so instead of yellow, and I did talk to Jeff about this, we should use 3,000 Kelvin.
and it should be no more than 3,000
Yes,
Kelvin. Also,
maximum.
you got to put a K in there
Yes.
for Kelvin.
You got the sale.
So maximum of 3,000, not just.
You got the sale. Next.
Maximum
I'm
foot
not sure
candles
what
of the property line.
Lady must not
What was the answer on that one?
And maximum
They
putting-
propose putting in maximum foot candles of the
Oh,
property
okay.
line must be 0.
Yeah.
Is that?
What did you say to that?
I think
I
this
didn't
makes-
have any, we don't have any comment on it.
Seems extreme. No spillover even onto a sidewalk? You can't see a light from the sidewalk.
The language that was in there was really vague, so I was trying to put something enforceable.
12.
Lane must not trespass onto adjacent property sidewalks or the right of way. That was what the previous language was.
Let's.
The current is 1/2 foot candle.
1/2. Can we stick with that?
Would you repeat that?
Zero.
Which question?
Oh, the current limit is 1/2 foot candle at the property line.
That's-
If you guys are fine, I just,
Yeah.
something that they
Yeah,
can measure.
let's do what we got.
Makes sense to me.
The maximum for non-cutoff fixtures, I feel pretty strongly this needs to go down to 1,600, from
At the
3,000. So you can have an uncovered 100-watt incandescent bulb or its equivalent.
Yep. That, yep. You could.
Same thing, yeah, building lighting, putting a maximum on that. Because people get kind of crazy with uplights. And we're trying to be a dark sky city.
So that gives me some heartburn just because over in the downtown mall committee, everyone's talking about the historic uplights that Halprin put on the trees on the downtown mall, and there's a whole thing about how even the dark sky people think that can be appropriate in a place like the downtown mall. Technically, the mall doesn't have to comply with these requirements, but everyone seems to think that we should generally be fair and, comply with the requirements we're proposing on everyone else.
Would you like to exempt that district?
That's one way to do it.
I mean, 100-watt uplight on a tree is still.
A lot of uplight.
And I'm
But the
saying,
tree is blocking it with its leaves. It shouldn't
but
be.
it doesn't have leaves all
going-
year.
It shouldn't,
Good point.
yeah.
I feel pretty strongly about this in the sense that, we keep trying to say that we're trying to do dark sky compliance, and we're failing pretty badly.
I would agree that 1,600 is a good number, but it's just me. Lyle?
I have no opinion, but I'm looking at Bill Palmer, who knows more about this than me. Would you be willing to weigh in on this? I'd like my opinion to be more informed.
sure where my
Uplighting
knowledge
of trees and buildings.
Uplighting comes from, but.
You guys
We've
have
just been
uplighting?
designated.
In the kingdom of the
We do
blind and
not.
all that.
I think we're getting away from it. There might be places on grounds where there still are uplights, but generally, yeah, we've gotten away from uplighting trees.
How come?
Short
From
sketch.
dark skies, it's just generally a maintenance headache that we don't need to deal with then, things like that. I think security-wise too, I don't think it should be like a security, help with security, so, there's really no benefit. It's, uses electricity, which is a carbon suck, it's just, why?
Thank you, that's helpful.
Any thoughts? Graham?
No, I agree. 1600.
James, do you know how bright
Or-
Halpern's lights were?
I don't.
Mr. 1600 is the consensus. With one kind of guy
I don't-
kind of going like this.
Yeah, all right, as proposed.
Yeah.
So the last note here, Carl, just to differentiate, the reason GC is different from C2 is C2 is referring to pole-mounted lights, and this one could be a building-mounted light or similar, so. So that's why I'm suggesting just keep them both.
Okay.
It's not,
Oh, yeah,
yes, it's kind of repetitive, but there is a
No, that's
differentiation.
fine.
But they are at least consistent.
Okay. Hey,
Shoot, I have to pull that up in the code.
Okay, so now we're in,
10.5.1.
now we've moved into,
authority.
yes, authority, yes. All right.
Why is this
So
section-
this is
whose
referring to
this?
historic districts. These are,
It's, additions and deletions to reviewing the, contributing buildings, is it not?
yeah.
And just the language was different for each. I think the ADCs required residents and business owners to weigh in, and the historic conservation districts did not. And it seemed a little funny that, I know one has got a much lighter hand than the other, but it just seemed odd that they would be differentiated like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have any qualms about doing it. I think this was, I mean, we've generally been taking a light touch on the historic
Mhm.
districts.
I mean, I guess the difference was the amount of public input that goes into changes to the historic conservation districts. And it seemed like, I imagine the people who live in the historic conservation districts probably want to be involved just as much as
Mhm.
those who live in the ADCs.
So we can duplicate the language.
Okay.
Approval process, let's see.
What happens if the list of contributing structures is not reconfirmed every 15 years? Is it void?
You don't want to know.
All right.
No, there isn't a penalty or anything.
It doesn't disappear?
No.
Okay.
I
One of
mean,
them
you
is
could-
about to run out next March. So,
What's about to run out next March?
the 15 years.
So, Section 527D1, I talked to Jeff about that.
Do you feel
Ignore what I
resolved?
said.
So do we need this language or no? That was.
You
that
do
was-
not need that language. Yeah, Jeff would prefer to leave it as it was.
Okay. The remaining items on here were correcting typos, which we appreciate.
Wait, why do we not need that language? Is it because we already assume that our design guidelines prevail? Because personally, I think there are a lot of problems with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation.
There are, so what Jeff was saying is that the actual portion of those standards, it's only 10 items and they're pretty small, but our CLG requirements mention the Secretary of the Interior standards. And the concern is that the language I wanted to add might get us in trouble as a certified local government.
Okay.
So we can fix that later, and Jeff's suggestion was in the guidelines to actually put stuff that, where our guidelines would supersede the Secretary of the Interior standards.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll get around to doing our guidelines at some point.
Yeah.
We have started, we are doing it.
Good.
We're having
More
work
than
sessions.
hopefully, those guidelines need to be updated. All right. Good, so the next two items were just typos, again, appreciate the eyes for typos. Number 12, subdivision. Rory, this was yours.
Oh, right, this is mine. Does anyone have a problem with this or questions about it?
What is
Basically,
62
so like think about like a PUD or something like Robinson Woods or whatever. Typically, you subdivide it up, you make a bunch of parcels for houses to be on, and then you have like one parcel that's kind of like the remaining land that's either or both used for stormwater and for recreation, and they are almost never like shaped correctly. So the idea is basically you can have a stormwater parcel or a recreation parcel that doesn't meet the like lot frontage requirements and the shape and size requirements, that's still commonly owned, rather than forcing you to put it in each of the individual parcels.
Yeah, and there are a lot of them like that already. I mean, most condominium
Yeah.
developments, the common elements are
And it's-
whatever's left over, whatever the residue is, and they make a lot to
Pretty much
just be done with it.
required with modern stormwater rules.
Yeah.
So-
And NDS's plots were,
No, it makes sense. And this is also something that exists in the existing subdivision ordinance, so
We
it
just
makes sense to
kind
bring it
of
forward.
lost it.
great,
Yeah.
all right.
All right, moving into general standards.
Me again.
Just noting, this is chapter 7. That's the last one. Article 7.
It seemed funny that like trellises, arbors, pergolas, these seem like things that people put up against their fences. And we are specifically prohibiting them from being against a property line. It seemed a little odd. I mean, I don't feel super strongly about it, it just felt odd.
I think I can make the argument for, I guess, volleyball nets, but the rest of it, I mean, having a volleyball net. on
Maybe
the
you're really
property-
competitive with your neighbor and set up
But,
opposing
you know,
teams.
trellises are, I mean, there are places in town that have got those now, and it's actually aesthetically beneficial.
Oh, you got
Yeah.
a basketball hoop and the kid keeps missing the shot and it goes in my yard. She's my dog.
Should get better. I mean, I don't know how to fix that, it just seemed, yes, kind of.
It doesn't bother me at all, but.
And then the part about the, it seemed like we did need a section for freestanding enclosed structures that are smaller than what you would require.
Okay, what are we gonna do about the basketball hoops?
Okay, well, yeah.
So what I'm hearing is a general consensus that, because what this section is simply saying is how far they're allowed to encroach within the setback, but what we're really saying is that they should, the setback shouldn't apply to these.
Yeah, or they should be allowed to encroach the maximum. I don't know, it's the same thing.
One
I
way or the
guess,
other, yeah.
but,
It's-
So is there a health and safety benefit to the setbacks?
Yeah, you keep the
Like your
basketball
trellis could
bouncing in
burn
the yard.
down, I guess.
Like I'm trying to,
I mean, I guess we restrict opaque fences to a certain height, and if you had a trellis with stuff growing on it, it would make it opaque, and that would be, I don't know.
It didn't.
Yeah, but chain link fence and kudzu, you get the same deal,
So, yeah, okay.
trust me.
I
You're the
I
expert.
feel like that item is resolved. Great.
Yeah, everyone else except me
Uh,
is cool with it.
So then,
But not volleyball nets.
no, we will specify only where there's teams set up on either side of the line, then it's allowed. All right. These are considered, all right, so the freestanding enclosed structures, sheds, doghouses, chicken coops, greenhouses, these are considered accessory structures, and therefore the rules for accessory structures apply. That was what was explained to me.
Are they accessory structures if they're under a certain square footage?
I,
I should know that, I don't. I guess I think currently, well, I don't know, I mean, currently, can you put a shed on a property line if it's
No,
smaller than,
5 feet off.
okay.
in the
Like,
existing ordinance,
like
it's 5 feet.
technically,
I think
like-
it's not that much in this
yeah,
one.
sheds are easier in greenhouses, dog houses and chicken coops. Most chicken coops are up against a building. Dog houses, we don't go out and regulate dog houses.
So, is any of this being currently enforced? Because the number of sheds that are been converted into sort of a jackleg improvised garages along alleys in Belmont could be measured in the dozens, and they are not finding back in property
Right.
line.
So-
Well, but if they're
Whoa.
there, I mean, a lot of them have been there
So,
forever.
right,
Yes,
so
it's
on the
19th
one hand,
century.
there's the question of whether they're legally non-conforming,
Yeah.
predate those owners. As far as whether it's been enforced, yeah, I mean, within the last year, we've had a shed enforced setback violation that's been enforced because of complaint from the neighbor.
Yeah,
Mm.
well,
Alley
I mean,
lot
I've seen a lot of them that are
lines-
not ancient that have gone up
Yeah.
recently, that's why I asked.
Alley lot lines, we went down to like 1 foot for encroachments, right?
Yeah.
Or is this separate from encroachments? I don't.
I mean, this is part of encroachments. I guess this could have been one of those, you know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I was getting confused
punchy.
and frustrated and, if it's not important, it's not important.
I mean-
It just seemed like it was something that, I don't know why, it felt
Well,
like a question I was gonna ask
And
at some point.
then the question, you said, the question that you raised was that we need to add a section for freestanding enclosed structures, sheds, doghouses. So what I would say also in response to this is probably the response from the consultant team is these are considered accessory structures. I think they were generalizing. Sheds and greenhouses would be accessory structures. The rest of them we probably wouldn't actually we wouldn't even identify as an issue.
I'm sorry, don't we have a section for enclosed structures? The part that says enclosed structures?
I think
Those
if you
are
read the definition of
projecting.
enclosed structures, it
I mean, I'm just
Oh.
looking at
covers
this right
larger
now.
items.
I see. Projecting, is that what we're talking about? It just says projecting and not.
Yeah.
In
Yes. that's
other
right, the definition
enclosed.
section.
Yeah, okay, so
Doesn't
we have
have
we define projecting enclosed structures like bay windows, but not sheds.
Not
Because the
freestanding
purpose of this
structures.
is to deal with, this is a definition section, right?
Yeah.
It's the general terminology section, which is separate, I think, right?
It's separate, but it
It's also sort of definitions.
it is part of, I mean, terminology definitions, right?
Well,
And I think what I was doing is I was looking at the standards for encroachments and looking at the definitions,
Right.
trying to understand the two together.
That's what I'm doing now. So it actually does suggest that we need a definition for enclosed structures, not just enclosed structures projecting.
or they can encroach, in which case they're 4 feet side and rear,
Right.
which is a little less than current anyway.
No, enclosed
It's
structures,
One thing, when you have a 25-foot rear yard requirement, I guess.
Well, for accessory structures, it's 5 feet currently.
Currently, yeah, yeah.
all right, I'll follow up in more detail on this item, because it looks like it does look like it needs a definition.
So I guess what I mean is, currently you need the exception, because otherwise it would be, you'd have to meet the full rear yard setback. But when your rear yard setback goes down to 4 feet, maybe you don't need an encroachment exception.
Well, I think,
Well, yeah.
and I think my concern actually was the definition.
But it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Active Jeff?
James, you ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the restrooms thing, I was confused if that was part of active depth. I think it should be. It looks like on the diagram that it is, but then I think the definition said it wasn't. I could have that backwards.
Right. No, I think you're right.
Gotta try to hold back on the jokes.
Please do. Yeah, again, me being picky on definitions with how household is defined, I'm thinking, how can someone game the system and build a little fraternity in a residential district?
So do you understand the differentiation in that definition?
I do, but it seems a little flimsy to say that they can lock their bedrooms and that's the definition.
I mean, it's recognizing the intent.
Mm-hmm. If you guys are
A boarding
comfortable
house, group living environment, it's not a household.
Mhm.
I mean, physically, because the bedrooms can be locked out, but it's not really, it's not just that they can lock out, it's the understanding that those are private spaces,
Mhm.
right? I.e., it is not a household. You know,
Mhm.
in a household,
Mhm.
theoretically, each member of the family can access any room. Each member of the household can access any room.
But this, I guess, you get 4 unrelated people renting a 4-bedroom apartment. And I know there's only 4 people at that point, but I'm just, the difference, if you guys feel comfortable with it, I'm fine with it. It
Right.
just seemed like it was something that I was questioning if that's something someone could take advantage of.
So my brothers would have disagreed with the idea that
Yeah, yeah,
any
yeah.
resident. could.
Right, gotcha, right.
But we permit group living, so, well, and that's defined
So
as
what do we think?
like the state protected kind.
Wow,
No thoughts on this issue?
no.
My thoughts on this issue are 100% congruent with Commissioner Solier's thoughts on the issue.
I mean, I'm not feeling, if staff feels comfortable with it, I'm fine. I wanted to make sure it was something, it wasn't a loophole that we're building in.
Personally, I think we should use the least restrictive possible definition of a household and not try to police what a family is.
Oh, yeah, that's
That's
certainly.
the overall direction
Understood.
that we're moving in, but, but it creates the challenge that Carl was identifying.
I don't think it's a challenge, I guess.
Fair
is what
enough.
I'm saying.
It's a
I think-
feature.
I think that's fine.
You guys-
I think
yeah.
that should be part of the
Well, I guess my-
allowed definition.
I was starting to wonder what happens when you have an extended family living together and they're over 8 people. And then is that?
Building
Any
code.
family can,
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna get involved, especially with the new code. We won't, and except from a building code perspective.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay. If it's not a concern, it's not a concern.
Do you guys want to exclude restrooms from the definition of active spaces? This was the first issue, but,
I'm fine with
I think it's
allowing
fine.
restrooms to be active.
yep, okay. Now, I mean, from a
The alternative,
practical
yeah.
perspective, well, anyway, yeah, I'm not gonna go into it, it's fine. I understand why it was included in the definition, but it's probably not a major issue.
The next section came from yet another entity that wanted to have a little bit different.
Yes.
I haven't read through this, so.
This is the historic district's provisions.
Oh,
We discussed today, right?
Yeah.
Right, so the vast majority of these are kind of technical edits, and I apologize that this arrived today. This came from a letter that you all received from Preservation Piedmont. Again, the majority of this is basically making sure that we have consistency between our existing, it's bringing forward provisions of our existing ordinance and kind of cleaning up some aspects of that. The one thing I want to highlight, if we can skip to it, is number 9, which would be on page 2 on my document.
Mhm.
So if you look at the first paragraph, now, leaving aside, this is all red because it's moving around, and that's one of the issues with redlining, right? But, so all of this is existing language, except if I go to the very first paragraph of 9C, or C, the very first paragraph in this section, the last sentence of that is new. And this is getting at something that Preservation Piedmont has specifically requested. In their letter, they suggested basically including language in every single section saying that BAR has the authority to, reduce or modify these limitations. And this is putting that authority in one place. I would note the existing language allows them to provide conditions relative to this compatibility with the scale and character of the district at play. This is making it even more explicit, saying conditions may require a reduction in height or massing consistent with the city's design guidelines. Now, if we took this approach, I would also then suggest that we follow what has been Carl's recommendation of removing the step-back requirements that are explicitly written in the downtown district and relying on the BAR, which again, Carl's raised a number of times. And I'd also remove the BAR review language from the downtown district and rely simply on that that condition is allowed. But I think this is worthy of y'all's time to debate.
Well, you know where I stand. I mean, I will say, if we don't want the BAR to reduce height or massing, as they feel necessary to meet the character of the district, I think we need to drastically downsone downtown.
Well, but we already have it in downtown. The question, it seems to be whether it's appropriate elsewhere.
But yeah.
It seems to me that it's ripe for abuse, to be honest, to say, essentially freeze Park Street, the North Downtown ADC, for example, in place.
Well, I'll note, there's something, the existing language does speak to the scale and character. So I, to the extent that it's been exercised or not, it seems like there's at least some language that's pointed to the idea that the BAR had this authority. But also note the next line, prior to attaching conditions to an approval, due consideration must be given to the cost of compliance with proposed conditions. I do appreciate that balancing factor. And then the last thing I'll note is, the only new sentence in here is that last sentence where I added the words consistent with the city's design guidelines. It cannot be arbitrary. It's got to be reflective of design guidelines, and this speaks to the need to update those and make those even more clear. Carl, I'm not looking at you on purpose, but you are on the.
I mean, our guidelines, and we usually we've been pretty liberal with them. I mean, they say, I think 200% is a number that's used for how much taller something can be than its surroundings. But again, a previous BAR approved the Dewberry. And I was on the BAR when we approved an extra couple stories on top of that, which had not been built. You have mentioned West Sacken a couple times, and that's actually not how that went down. I was the swing vote on that, and it was not about height. It was the fact that the entire South Street facade was 3 stories of unmodulated mass. So it just would have been a flat wall all the way down for 200 feet, which would not meet our current zoning code. So that was why I voted down that one. And there's a lot more to that. That was a complicated, I don't think that was an honest application by the developer. So, yeah, and we whittled a little bit of mass out of the Wharton Baker house, or Wharton Baker apartment building, but that's still, I believe, a 4-story building that it wraps a historic structure. So, I mean, I think the BAR has been pretty liberal about height and massing, and just reducing it where it's absolutely necessary. And usually it's for a step back or, to get you a little bit more space for street trees or something.
I'm comfortable.
We can use it, you're the other architect in the room, so. Can you give us some guidance?
I hear Rory. I was contemplating that, we already have it in downtown, but listening to what Carl's saying, the problem is that it could change and the board could change.
And council can always overrule us.
And there's that. So I'm comfortable with the new language, with that they may require a reduction in height or massing. We could not, I always try to make things more complicated. have a limit to how much they can reduce it. I believe Commissioner Solly Gates may have mentioned that in the last meeting. That just makes it a little more predictable for applicants and gives the BAR some power to. But how does that affect then, I'm thinking out loud, the downtown zone?
Someone wants to
DX.
put a 10-story building in, and they say, they present to the BAR
Yeah.
the possible massing that's allowed by zoning.
You can
and
only
they
change the 10%,
present
that's-
50% of that, and that gets us a 5-story building on the mall that we can't whittle away to give a step back if we need one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, another thing I worry about, because yes, they sort of do have this ability now, is that by putting it in here it's almost calling for it to happen, rather than it being a tool in the toolkit.
Yeah.
I think it makes it pretty clear to developers that you need to go to the BAR with your schematic design and don't come in with a final project.
Going back and forth on this.
But the BAR can only provide the approval once it's for the entire COA,
Right.
even though you all do have preliminary discussions and other discussions along the way. So there could be some confusion because they wouldn't have necessarily everything designed per se, but maybe they're trying to get some feedback on the height, and then as they get more things designed, maybe it doesn't work. I don't know.
Well,
Just
that's
something
always
to throw out there.
that is always yes, that's always a risk when someone is designing something. If the final details don't work, it gets voted down.
Could you repeat the point you made about the BAR and making decisions regarding step backs?
Just that, there may be a natural point for a building to have like if someone is building on the mall, we have existing structures, and maybe there's a certain depth that makes sense to preserve before you go up with a tall building behind it. So that would be the BAR determining how deep that step back has to be. Similarly, there's.
But
or like
the
a-
BR makes that determination, or is the BR the only entity that can say this step back is where it needs to be, or are there other entities that get to do that?
Well, there's the applicant that's gonna suggest something.
Right,
And
yeah,
then
right.
there's, if the applicant or public doesn't like the decision that the BAR made, it
It
goes to council.
So, but the BR is like the primary arbiter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Not the public exactly, right? It has to be an interested party.
Yeah, I don't know how that's defined, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I'm all right with where you're going with this.
I mean, it's the way it's been done.
Yeah. And we have the ADC,
Rory's not happy with that.
districts for a reason, so,
Okay.
and we have the city guidelines.
As a temporary thing, because I think this is really addressing downtown concerns, which I agree are reasonable, could we just say in downtown ADC?
I think I get really worried about putting specific, no, because I think it needs to happen elsewhere as well. I mean, I think on Wortland, we should have the ability to whittle away at a potential massing. Similarly on West Main. The only way that we have to provide step backs towards 10th and Page in West Haven on West Main is through the BAR, because the zoning code won't do it.
Okay, I'm good with this. Lyle, Phil. Got a little heartburn there.
If we can get guidelines that make it very clear that there needs to be some clarity for applicants, and I'm especially thinking about affordable housing here, and especially thinking about LIHTC here, some way to actually get the units in reliably, then I'm good with it. If we can't do that, then I see real problems.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my concern, that it's a stalking horse. I'm sorry, the BAR wouldn't let us do that. Or conversely, you know, you get a composition of the BAR that can be a little aggressive on that stance too.
And I guess that's where you have council as a fallback. So if the affordable units are worth that much to, you know, make the building out of character, council will go for it. I mean, I'm pretty confident they would. So it could potentially be a hindrance. It could be like the solar panels, although I think we've learned our lesson on that. So it's, it might slow something down a little bit.
It definitely will slow the process down because
And add
it'll be
cost.
really hard to parallel the site plan process because there's a really big element that will be a variable that wasn't necessarily before. So it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think I'm congruent, I think I'm once again congruent with Mr. Soliates' views here.
Sorry, I might have missed what Mr. Sullivan's views were.
He was a little worried about the impact on affordable housing and ability to get light and things like that when you
Yeah.
leave the BA step back to the BAR.
Yep, and the BAR has explicitly refused to consider that, which they always say, trust the process, do the appeal, but
Yeah, so we send the affordable housing providers with their LIHTC deadlines and everything else
Exactly.
through this gauntlet to get to city council, for city council to say, yeah, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
And we're X number of months later, and, yeah, I mean, that's the issue.
and yet, there's nothing stopping them from forcing that now with the language that's just slightly less clear on this subject.
As James mentioned, I do like the addition of due consideration will be given to the cost and compliance.
That's
the
actually
cost
not
of
new
compliance.
language. That's
Not new
existing
but
language.
Language that seems to have, isn't always acknowledged.
Right.
My problem with that language is like,
What is
it's
due
talking about
consideration?
direct cost, right? Like, oh, you have to put brick instead of vinyl, and not, you know, opportunity cost of your building now doesn't have all of this floor area, which does not seem to be covered. If that could be made
Well,
broader, I
no,
could
I mean,
live
I
with
actually,
it.
I don't know why I wouldn't read it as, in the broader sense. Due consideration will be given to the cost of compliance with the proposed conditions. So if one of those conditions is that you have to reduce the
Can we,
height.
can we introduce some sort of due consideration to the priorities of the comp plan?
Yeah,
Consistent with the city's design guidelines and intent of the comprehensive plan? I'm okay with that.
I mean, that gives you, that gives at least somebody to yell about the affordable housing in the meeting.
And they do all the time, and we always say that's not our purview, but I think that
Well,
would
if
open
it
the door.
becomes your
Yeah.
purview, then you're gonna have to deal with it.
That would open the door. I
Okay,
think we would
so
appreciate that.
explain to me
Or for the solar panels,
where we are on this, and how does that help with the affordable housing worry?
Well, because we prioritize the housing and living in an environment, and so we could sort of point it even more directly there. Its comprehensive plan is
We
to-
do that, but we still are deferring to the bar.
But the BAR is now allowed to take that into consideration.
You said they
Before-
are allowed to now.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Yeah.
Like with the solar panels, they were like, oh, well, I don't care that we have a climate plan, it's not in our standards of review.
Yeah.
I can get with that. Lyle, that make you feel better?
Yes, I can see how that can work. And again, if we find it's a problem, we can change it later.
You
Yeah,
good with that?
I might
It's
find a
interesting.
different place to put that to make it actually more prominent.
Yeah,
Than-
because
than
it
there,
shouldn't just
but
be
yeah,
about massing,
right.
it should also be about.
Yeah,
solar
exactly.
Exactly, it
you're
should be
gonna
about the whole
express.
thing, right, yeah.
Right, yeah.
exactly.
No, this is good. I think this is good. I will find out. I
Yeah,
think this is
yeah,
good.
it might get the
They're-
BAR to raise their head up
Yeah.
from what they're looking at.
Or they may kill me in 2 weeks when at our next meeting. We'll see what happens.
You seem to be very concerned about various persons in the city ending your life.
This is,
Being angry at me.
Well,
We'll see.
I mean, I'm
I think it's
not,
good.
I'm
I
not
think
following
it's
on Carl's fears of harm, but, on slightly, just related topic, I mean, I want to emphasize that this does make the work on the BAR guidelines all the more important. So to be clear, that with this change, we also would be getting rid of the step-back requirements in the zoning ordinance. I might suggest that the BAR guidelines would need clearer standards around step-backs. So I was looking at them today, and it's there, so it's not like it's not referenced within those guidelines. And so other topics, so things for you to carry forward. And Jeff and I were talking about this today. Does anything else stand out within these changes for folks? And I apologize.
What I
I
really, you guys are gonna hate me for this, but I think we would not be doing proper due diligence if we didn't take at least 20 minutes just to read through this.
Sure.
Can we just read through it now and then? I'm sorry, guys, but
Do you want to take a recess for us to read it?
yeah.
That sounds good.
I think it's just, it's our job to. So 20 minutes. At 7:10, we're in recess now. We'll be out of recess at 7:10 to read through it. Sorry about that, but
Did the line about the,
can't read if you're talking. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Secretary of the Interior Standards?
So we're not
is
in
that only
recess.
Did it only show up in one spot?
I carried it forward in here just for
Okay.
consistency's sake, but we said we're not doing that, so I X'd it.
I
It's
just want
gone.
to make sure it wasn't in multiple places.
Oh, no, it's only in the one place in the whole overall.
All right, Carl, start reading.
All right, now recess.
I already read it, thank you very much.
So we're talking about this Johnny come late and 4 pages at the end here.
Yeah. Ooh, I had one question, but Mr. Freeze straightened me out, so we're good on that. Any questions or issues remaining?
I need to read it. We got 20 minutes, you said. I had 5 minutes to call. I was going to read it in 3 minutes and be done. All right. Fine. What are you talking about? Actually, I did skim this earlier today. Just give me a second.
I mean,
I mean, if it's helpful, I can walk through each of these and,
yeah, that's just the right thing to do, please.
Let's just do a quick walk.
It's the right thing to do.
all right, so, number one, we don't need the acronym. We never use it anywhere in the ordinance. Fair? Okay.
Yes.
Grammatically, this reads better with or.
Mhm.
This is a recommendation from Preservation Piedmont that notes that we had this exact language in the Historic Conservation District sections, but not previously in the ADC district. It's good, it's kind of considered a best practice,
Well,
and therefore, they were recommending added it into the ADC as well.
so we didn't have it in the the re-up part.
The
you
re-up
mean?
part,
Okay.
yeah.
The ADCs, I feel like we talked about this last time, but I don't remember. Some of them, every building is contributing unless it was built past whatever.
We did talk about this where we went ahead and took all the individual language about it and consolidated it into one paragraph that was
Everyone's got a
consistent.
map.
All of them have a map that identify the contributing
And all of them are
buildings.
gonna be reconfirmed every 15 years.
And all of them are going to be
We're really
reconfirmed
gonna
every
do
15
that.
years.
We need to.
All right.
There you go.
I'll send the list in of all the buildings I think are ugly. So we can-
That's not what, that doesn't determine whether they're contributing or not.
Yeah.
All right. It was noted that IPPs were missing from that section and ought to have been there. Commas, make that more readable. This, I don't know if I can explain this one, but Jeff and I talked about it at length. It's not necessary to have that line in that section.
It's redundant, it's not changing powers.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Something like that, yes. This one is noting, so we already had this rule, so this is all windows and doors and any change in your materials for roof coverings or sidings need to go for major review, major historic review. This was already in the minor review section where it said these things are not subject to minor review, therefore they are subject to major review. This is simply clarifying by bringing it into major reviews. Right. So it was
Yeah.
already in there.
I will say this is one thing where, I mean, I don't know what the design guidelines say now, but a lot of, generally across the country, this is where historic review comes into tension with environmental efficiency,
Yep.
requiring terrible windows, and I hope that the BAR is not as bad as, say, San Francisco is on that one.
Windows are an issue, and we need to discuss windows as a group. But there's, the preservationists throw out study after study saying that if you keep the window, you're actually, and you put up a storm window, you're doing better because you're not throwing away materials. Now, I like a window that opens, so we need to look at our guidelines on that. It is an issue.
I think that's a good point. I think that's something that can come up through the guidelines and may also come to a head when we get into doing the environmental, review of our environmental regulations, as, if you will, phase 2 of all this.
Mhm.
All right, number 8 in the Historic Conservation District. This is clarifying, there was a lot of repetition in this section, so we did two things. One is we very clarified that the first paragraph of this section is about construction of new buildings, because there's, the subsequent sections cover the additions, and demolitions. Then the other thing here was noting that we were using the term visible from any abutting street. There was a concern raised by Preservation Piedmont that, well, if it's hidden by vegetation, vegetation can die and then it becomes visible. So they were concerned about the temporalness of that standard. So we are noting here that you can, it doesn't count if it's only hidden by vegetation. So For
And
the
the-
purposes of regulation, we can see through vegetation.
And the current language is that the principal structure has to conceal them.
Right, and the conversation that Jeff and I had on this note was that there could be a large accessory structure, say a garage,
Mhm.
that is hiding something from view. The garage is contributing structure, it's gonna stay, therefore, we should be able to have the advantage of that
What's
obscuring garage.
That makes sense to me. What's the rationale behind a fence being like vegetation that can die? Fences don't typically die.
I'm happy to take fence out. I just put it in there as, I mean, the fences are often not opaque anyway.
Hmm.
Right,
But then it wouldn't be hidden from view.
right, but it'd be visible. Hey, we can take fence out. Doesn't bother me. I threw it in there when I wrote vegetation.
I think vegetation's fine. If it's something like, I don't know.
I would
a
say,
wall.
no, I'd say keep fence. I mean, if it, yeah, I mean, it's basically, I mean, there's gonna be so few cases that this is actually gonna come up, but, I mean, someone could have a tall fence along the street, and it's a corner lot, and we should be able to review what happens behind that fence. Now, the example of like a contributing garage or, outbuilding or something, that makes a lot more
Yeah,
sense.
I don't care that much. It's fine.
All right, so number 9, we've talked about the big issue in number 9. The other issue here was that it was reorganized for clarity, because it was kind of all over the place. And then number 10, this was a comment raised by Preservation Piedmont. They noted that the criteria for review was different. It was different between ADCs, IPPs, which are together, and historic conservation districts. We had merged those because they are, to our eyes, very similar, but the feeling was that there were nuanced differences that needed to be reflected, and so we separated them out again and brought forward the standards from the existing ordinance.
Can you
for
explain
that.
what those nuanced differences are? Because I don't know what they are.
Well, they're, if you compare the language here, let's see if I can pull out an example. Well, they are different. I'm trying to,
You
I
believe
looked
them.
at it,
You agree.
I believe them, I
Thank you.
looked at it, they are different.
But this language is identical to the existing ordinance, correct?
It is, yes.
Okay.
The
Trying to
HCDs are
remember.
missing a couple bullets.
The ADCs are missing bullets?
HCDs.
HCDs are
Historic-
missing, what bullets are
No,
they
not,
missing?
they have fewer than the ADCs.
Oh, they
Oh,
do,
yeah,
yes, they
compared to
do.
each other.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
So
one of the differences, yeah. I thought you were saying that we
No,
were missing one in
they're-
here.
The text is fine, yeah.
Yeah. The only difference between the existing and the proposed is, and this was something that was reflected in the proposed text in number 10, in our existing draft. One of the criteria referred to impacts on the neighborhood, and we changed that to impacts on the abutting structures. Because we think that is both more measurable and ultimately, you're gonna get to the neighborhood by looking at each abutting in a historic district where everything's supposed to largely stay the same. So we felt that that was an appropriate change. So that is a difference that was reflected in the draft we already had, and I believe carried forward into, yes, if you look at D under the HCDs, the effect of the proposed change on the adjacent buildings or structures, as opposed to in the existing language, it says on the adjacent, or it says on the neighborhood. And then finally, on the enforcement clause, I think this was, again, a suggestion from Preservation Piedmont, I think a very good one, because we were only identifying failure to maintain in the ADCs. This is extending that to include both, also the IPPs and the HCDs, and putting a little more meat on what is meant by maintain.
So, this actually is an expansion of what's in the current ordinance, right? Which applies to ADCs and IPPs, but not conservation districts.
Could be, yeah.
I was not really plugged into the whole Woolen Mills Conservation District controversy, but I seem to recall that some concern was that it would open, homeowners up to enforcement actions by the city, because people don't like their, exterior paint job or whatever. And maybe that's also come up in talking about, like, designating new conservation districts.
So what does that mean, don't like their exterior paint color?
Like,
Don't
you
like
have
the
flaking
color
paint
or
or
flaking
whatever.
paint?
No, yeah, it didn't say color. Paint
Okay.
job.
This is talking about demolition by neglect, right?
Yeah.
I think it's trying to talk about demolition by
It
neglect.
is, yeah.
And in an HCD, you do have to get
Well,
permission to demolish a building.
I think if you took out produce a detrimental effect upon the character of a design district, like the second part, the life and character of a contributing structure or protected property, is talking about demolition by neglect. The detrimental effect on the character is, I live in, a fancy design control district and I don't like that my neighbor's house isn't up to my standards.
If we make a change, it should be, we need this language for the ADCs and the IPPs.
Yes, which is what's currently there. I agree with that.
Do those need the character of a design district? Is that useful for those?
For the ADCs and IPPs, yes.
Well, I can think of some pretty shabby IPPs, honestly.
Well, you should drop a dime.
No.
So,
All right,
so what are we making a different one for HCDs?
that's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
So, so what am I doing for HCDs? A different one or none at all?
I think you're removing detrimental effect upon the character of a design district. So just removing the character of a design district.
Yep.
And leaving in life and character of the contributing structure or protected property. Does that do what you
Is
wanted,
there,
Lauren?
is there existing?
Yeah, life and character still,
Rory, is there,
gets
I'm assuming you have it open. in
there's
front of you.
nothing in there
There's
about
nothing in there at
maintenance
all
for
for maintenance for
conservation that
HCDs.
I'm seeing. Nope. And that's part of the appeal of
So-
HDs being, a light historic district, is you only have to go to the BAR when,
You're making a change.
yeah.
So, Carl, what I'm gonna suggest is, as you guys are doing your guidelines review, I had suggested to Jeff that you guys should also be looking at whether there are further ordinance changes as you're going through that process that makes
Mhm.
sense. So that's something you can carry at that, and we can carry it as a separate action that makes sure it also gets its due attention, particularly if it's a feature rather than a bug of the HCD.
So, as far as the zoning code that we're voting to approve next week, what are we not doing anything?
That's what I'm hearing, and that be an ordinance change that's carried separately so that it can be considered. Because if it's true that the HCDs were intended, if it's a feature rather than a loophole,
Mm-hmm,
then it should be given due attention
mm-hmm,
as a standalone amendment.
okay. So, well, but I do think this language makes sense if you just strike historic conservation district, is that?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I'm doing.
All right. And that's everything that was on the agenda for tonight, because we are waiting for more input on the anti-displacement districts from legal. So we'll get that next Tuesday. So are there any other issues you guys like to raise? Let's just go around the room and start with Bill. Bill, anything else? Mr. Schwartz?
No, I think I'm good.
So I got a request earlier today from a church on the corner. They are in CX3, abutting an RB, and they want to add an addition. And the problem is, well, arguably that whole area shouldn't be RB or RC at all. I proposed that in 2021, wasn't taken up, whatever, we're stuck with that now. Doesn't make a difference if we make it RC. But their addition they're proposing doesn't seem to really be, physically incompatible or even not allowed in our B and C. And so, I wonder if it makes sense to have the transition rules only apply if the building you're putting up, wouldn't be allowed in the other district, right? Like, if you're in RX5, but you're putting up a single-family house, you shouldn't have to put, a giant setback between you and the RA district next door just because your zone is CX5, even if the thing you're putting up is allowed in RA. Does that make sense?
Ms. Christie, isn't that a BCA issue more than
BC, what's?
BZA?
Oh, BZA,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Well,
potentially,
I mean, at this point, as far as.
it's not really a hardship, though.
No, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so your pathways, so Roy's suggested an amendment to the language. The other pathway available would be the special exception process that we discussed at the last meeting. I would need to look into what you're describing for the transition.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a half-baked idea, I admit. And what I would have told them is go do the special exception, but I'm kind of thinking about how we also have, we have some areas that have single-family houses predominantly and are, next to an RA or whatever, and so we would be imposing, and they are in a CX whatever, over by,
I can get my head around what you're describing.
yeah, I don't know. I don't have an exact suggestion, so if you could workshop that, that'd be great. I don't have anything else.
Mr. Bob.
Corinne, one of the things that you had mentioned that in the tree commission's letter, they had proposals with regard to the protection of street trees. And I just wanted to note, yeah, well, it's a prominent one, and it's one, I 100% agree with that intention. I've talked with the city, I forget his title, arborist, about Arlington has an ordinance that protects their street trees. It's taking our existing, they have the exact same tree protection ordinance as far as heritage trees and all that stuff. Arlington has the exact same one, word for word. I'm sure there's a template somewhere that we're all stealing from. And then they've added on to that this section about street trees. And basically what it does is it takes that existing one that has the 4 types of trees you can protect, one of them being street trees, and just says street trees are automatically protected. So you don't need to go to council to get a street tree protected. And then it lays out a whole process associated with that. And I've spoken with him about, let's just do that. Take the language from Arlington and do it. It's not a zoning issue, and it takes care of the whole issue. And it also allows us to set up a pathway for mitigation funds or whatever from that to go into a designated tree fund and all that stuff, which I was a little more concerned about trying to do within the zoning ordinance, but is readily doable in a tree ordinance.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That
See, I
answers-
read your mind.
Yeah.
I saw it coming.
Let's see, just as a general information point, the HAC Policy Subcommittee met today, following on the heels of a Sunshine on behalf of the HAC's presentation on displacement last night. Council and city manager has asked for some solid recommendations on that really have not been dug into here much at all. Having to do with overlay zones and other options. We're trying to get the things that touch zoning directly. I don't think that's going to be available to review by Tuesday, by us. So I'm not sure what we do about that. It's going to go directly to council. And that may require, and I'm not really sure the mechanics of how to make that work.
And, I mean, at some point, we also need to coordinate, given the fact that we're also working on that same topic. on
Yeah, I
staff
think,
side.
and one of the issues here is that we really do need to get legal backed into a corner so we can have some extensive conversation about what's what.
Certainly not how I would.
Well, yes, I know. I know you wouldn't, but,
So, So, yeah, Sunshine mentioned the meeting last night, but I never got any word as to when or where that meeting was.
Noon over in, on the 700 Second Street, yeah.
Okay.
Next time I hop into my time machine, I will make sure I know where that
Yeah,
was.
you don't have a DeLorean parked in the,
Right.
Mr. Silhits.
I have two items. So, given that we're not considering an action tonight, that means we have productive language on anti-displacement coming? We have good news coming? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm saying that we are working on that issue, yeah.
That-
Collectively with our consultant, our zoning consultant teams, our legal counsel, and staff, we are working on those issues, yeah.
Okay, I'm taking that as good news. Thank you very much.
Would you be willing to lay out the general idea you're working on, or should I be patient?
Can I ask you to be patient? I mean,
I'll try.
so the main issue the main idea that we're working on is the corridor, the main one we've been working on today is the corridor overlay, which we discussed at y'all's last meeting. What I am trying to do is strike a balance between the objective to provide a discretionary review process that has the potential to line up community benefits with trying to also make this as predictable and, predictable as possible, right?
Mhm.
So that is the balance we're trying to strike.
convenient, that's one of the things the hack wants you to do.
That's the tricky part, yeah.
It is.
And
Well, I
you
guess-
mentioned you had two.
I had two
Ideas
ideas.
on that.
My second thing, I was watching the council, the first council discussion about the zoning ordinance, I think last week. That sounds right. And a major portion of the presentation was about the importance of width restrictions. And as the speaker was speaking on it, I kept thinking, didn't we just kill those in our last work session? So I just wanted to bring it back up about the 40-foot width cap. Mr. Freeze, could you briefly summarize what was presented to council on this item?
Yeah, I believe you all got a copy of the presentation. I don't know if I can summarize exactly what was presented, but I think the notion this is the issue that as I look at it, that I think we should at least pay attention to. When we talk about the oversized houses or buildings that people become concerned about, and one of the things that, sorry, I'm collecting my thoughts here. The entire effort in terms of the house size, house scale buildings has always been about how buildings present from the street, right? Maintaining a scale across residential neighborhoods. The problem we run into with the wider buildings that are both tall is from prior experience, that's where you get into the territory which people start to perceive buildings as being large, out of character or what have you. When they're a single story and wide, people aren't bothered by that. When they're multiple stories and narrow, people aren't bothered by that. It is when they are wide and tall, that's where you get into the area of concern. And I think the ordinance was attempting to address that, and the original ordinance had kind of a strict limit on width. It then, we introduced, based on conversations at this table, when there's a wider lot, allowing a greater width of the building. But since then, we've kind of just allowed that greater width of the building even on the more narrow lots. And so I think what Commissioner is suggesting is we revisit and perhaps discuss that further.
And that may be a longer discussion that we can have tonight, but my suggestion is that we should have some kind of solution for this problem, because I agree that it could be a problem.
I guess I'd say we did land on keeping a maximum building width. It's just that on a narrow lot, your width is constrained by the narrowness of the lot, and so we should let the setbacks ride as long as you're not hitting the actual building width limit we're talking about, which is still pretty restricted, right? It's less wide than Lloyd's house.
What did we
Maybe
say?
what's our new
60
standard?
or
60.
Yeah,
Which is,
so
which is a
40 to
single-story
60.
house.
Yes.
And that is kind of my point, like, no one's bothered by a single-story, 60-foot wide house.
All right, so last week we talked about map changes, and there's one thing that we didn't really make a decision on, and this is 601 Brown Street. This is a property that is enveloped by City Yard. That City Yard there. City Yard is RC. Well, this vacant lot is RA. City Yard, RC, vacant lot, RA. The city yard, RC, vacant lot, RA.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
I know it.
Okay, what I'd like to do is be consistent. It's a vacant lot, nothing's happening there. We ought to make it consistent with city yard and make this RA lot RC, just like city yard is. What I did is I complexified the problem by talking about, what I wanted to be down in the future, which was RX3, because the city yard will someday be as well. And I shouldn't have gone there with you guys, because I just made it more complicated.
So I agree, and in fact, in November 2021, proposed to make it the same as City Yard. The problem, as I recall, was that we've been told we're not allowed to do anything that's not consistent with the FLUM, and the FLUM says general residential. And so unless we change the comprehensive
Well,
plan.
city yard is RC, right? And so is that, how is that?
So the city yard
But that was
and that
medium.
parcel were differentiated on the land use map.
We just made a mistake, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
You guys should have listened to me.
Well, we should, you're right. So you're,
November of
again,
'21.
you guys once again telling me to go pound sand, and I should come back to you later.
It's a satisfying.
But that's not how we would put it.
It's an unsatisfying. I told you so, but.
Yourself.
But, I mean, I think it makes sense probably at some point in the next year to go back and look at all those little problems like that is a big one.
Yeah.
And-
Right.
Wait. I did actually have an item. I didn't do my homework. I didn't test the transition zone on JPA. Do you know if Christie looked at that by any chance?
I doubt it at this point in time.
Okay.
Transition,
I guess
and this was, so we had talked about the map and we had talked about the split zone. We got
Yes.
we did get a firm recommendation to avoid split zones. And you wanted to test the transition in terms of how it would play
Yeah,
out
if that
on
would solve our
JPA.
problem.
Yeah,
And I did not do that.
okay.
So I don't know if we need to, I guess we need to revisit that next week briefly, or make sure. I would like comfort, I mean, it would be nice to know it works, otherwise we could end up with something pretty nasty in that area. Are you guys following? You've got a really confused look on your face.
I remember, this is just my face.
And I'm just trying to figure out a way to resolve it. I mean, we got a whole bunch of things to talk about,
Yeah.
to land this plane next week.
Since you didn't like my Lloyd's house example, it is, the 60-foot limit is about 10 feet or 12 feet less than the width of York Place by Grit and Marvin Lucas, which is a comparable height building. That what would be allowed?
York Place.
York Place on
York
the
Place.
downtown mall.
Yeah.
Grit, Marvin Lucas.
Right, yeah.
I have a possible approach. It's inspired by Mayor Snook's square footage restriction on the land. We could have a square footage restriction on the facade to the public realm, the thing that we actually see. Yeah,
Interesting.
which gets at that bulk issue, which I think could be productive.
So square footage, the vertical square footage,
Just
the
that.
limit of that.
Boy, that could make some of the geometry really hairy on a larger building, couldn't it? As to what the front facade looks like. You might be putting step backs on fronts of facades in residential districts at some point.
I don't want to add another regulation to our districts.
I'm just trying to think about, do you have a number in mind? No, you just, okay.
So
sort of by definition that already exists in the sense that it can be 60 feet wide times
X number of
3
feet high.
stories.
Right, but that would be too big, I would posit.
Well, 60 feet wide times the maximum wall height that I couldn't get removed.
I think it's hard to argue that the facade in that case is too big, and I don't think that's what Mayor Snooks is getting at, is that he thinks the overall building is too big, including its depth into the lot. But I have to ask him.
So what's the non-property owner's dog in the fight about the depth of the building on the lot?
The next door neighbor could see it from their backyard? Is
Yeah.
the problem, I guess?
Is that a problem?
I don't think it's a problem.
I mean, you
but-
can put a lot of things in your backyard your neighbor doesn't like looking at.
Um,
So, are we ready to make a recommendation to council?
Well,
I do not believe we are ready to make a recommendation to council, and I move that we push this to next Tuesday during our next planning commission meeting.
Is there a second?
yeah. Well,
All
So
in favor?
close. Aye.
Any opposition, any abstentions? Okay, we will revisit this next Tuesday at, beginning at 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock. Mr. Durancio, do you want to do your dance?
Actually, sort of as I've coming to the end of a remarkably long day, I'll point out that Saint Teresa of Avila was famous for saying that more tears have been shed for prayers answered than for prayers unanswered, which is sort of a nice turn of phrase on the be careful what you wish for, which we may want to import into the world of unintended consequences, what we've got here and how we've tried to struggle with that. But we adjourn with that in mind in honor of the anniversary of her death, which is today.
Anniversary for what?
Saint Teresa of Avila died today in
Or
1582.
anniversary of her death?
Death, correct.
Okay. I missed the her part. We are adjourned.
Great.